Eli Ward had spent most of his life riding alone across the wide desert plains, where red stone cliffs touched the sky, and long shadows moved across the sand like tired travelers. He was a quiet cowboy, the kind who spoke only when needed and listened more than most men around him. People in the frontier towns respected him because he never caused trouble, but they also whispered about the path he chose to ride straight along the border of the Apache Queen's territory, a place no white man entered unless he had a death wish. Every saloon had stories about her. Some said she could judge a man's truth by looking into his eyes. Others swore no outsider ever survived meeting her gaze. Eli heard these tales for years, but he never believed half of what people said. He had seen how fear could make stories bigger than real life. Even so, he kept distance from the deep canyons where the Apache people lived. He had no reason to bother them, and they had no reason to bother him. One late evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Eli heard a faint sound drifting through the warm air. It wasn't the cry of an animal. It wasn't the wind. It was a child's voice, trembling and desperate. Eli stopped his horse and listened again. The sound came from a narrow canyon nearby, a place most cowboys avoided. But a child in danger was a child, no matter whose child it was. Eli clicked his tongue softly and guided his horse toward the noise. He moved carefully, watching the rocky ground under him. The canyon walls rose steep and tall, almost closing in. Then he saw movement, a small figure trapped under a fallen rock. The child couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. His tiny arms were trying to push the heavy rock off his legs, but it wouldn't move. Dust covered his dark hair, and his breath came out shaky. Eli jumped off his horse and hurried toward the child. He spoke gently, knowing fear could make pain worse. He used the little Apache he knew, saying, "It's okay. I help." The child looked at him with wide, scared eyes but did not run. Maybe he didn't have the strength to be afraid anymore. Eli knelt and examined the rock. It was heavy but not impossible to lift. Bracing his feet, he leaned his weight and pushed with all his strength. The rock rolled just enough for him to pull the child free. The boy cried softly as Eli carried him to his horse. But the tears were more from shock than pain. "You're safe now." He didn't get a chance to say more. The sound of hooves thundered around him. Dust rose in the air as a group of Apache riders surrounded him from all sides. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Eli slowly lifted his hands away from his gun belt to show he meant no harm. The riders saw the injured child in Eli's arms and paused, unsure what to think. Eli gently placed the child down and stepped back. One of the riders rushed to the boy, speaking quickly in their own language. Then all their eyes turned back to Eli. Before he could explain, they moved in. They didn't hurt him, but they didn't trust him either. They motioned for him to get on his horse and follow them. Eli could have tried to ride away, but that would have been foolish. He knew they were only acting to protect their own people. So he nodded and followed quietly. They traveled deeper into Apache territory than Eli had ever gone. The path became narrow, then opened into a hidden valley, where dozens of huts stood among desert trees. People stopped their work as the riders brought Eli in. Some frowned, others whispered. Children peeked out from behind their mothers, curious about the stranger. Then the riders led him to a large tent decorated with colorful patterns. 2 guards stood outside, and between them stepped out a woman unlike anyone Eli had ever seen. She wore a long, dark braid that reached her waist, and her clothes were woven with skill and pride. Her face held strength and calm authority, not cruelty. Her eyes were sharp, but not cold. She was the Apache queen Ahelena. The people around them fell silent as Eli was brought before her. Legends about her flashed through Eli's mind, but he pushed them aside. He had met strong leaders before. Fear never helped anyone, and he had nothing to fear if he spoke truthfully. Ahelena studied him quietly, She did not shout or accuse him. Instead, she asked calmly how he found the child and why he helped. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of a person who had led her people through many difficult moments. Eli answered with honesty. He told her he heard the child crying, followed the sound, and freed him. He said a child's life mattered more than fear or stories. He explained he had no interest in harming anyone, and only wanted to make sure the boy was safe. The queen watched him with the famous gaze people spoke of, the one some believed could break a man. But Eli did not look away. He showed respect, not fear. Something in his calm manner surprised her. She turned to the riders, asking for the child's version of what happened. The boy confirmed everything, Eli said. For a long moment, Helena and Eli simply looked at each other. Around them, the tribe held its breath. Then the queen gave an unexpected order. Eli would not be treated as a prisoner. He would stay in the camp for the night, not in a guarded corner, but in a small tent near hers. People exchanged stunned looks. No outsider had ever been allowed near the queen's tent. But the rescued child clung to her hand and whispered to her. And whatever he said made her expression soften slightly. As the night grew colder, a guard brought Eli a blanket and a place to rest. But before he could settle in, Helena returned. She stood at the entrance of her tent and called him quietly. She wanted to speak with him again, not as a ruler questioning a stranger, but as a person trying to understand an unexpected act of kindness. Inside the tent, a warm fire burned. The walls glowed softly, and the air smelled of herbs and earth. Helena sat across from him, her eyes steady but thoughtful. She asked him about his life on the frontier, why he traveled alone, why he didn't fear stepping into Apache land even for a moment. Eli told her simple truths. He said he had lost family and friends over the years, and long journeys helped him keep his heart steady. He said he never judged people before meeting them. He said fear only made life smaller. The queen listened quietly. She rarely met outsiders who spoke with such honesty and calm. Most came with pride or fear. Eli carried neither. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of quiet understanding inside her tent. They talked until the fire began to shrink. There was no closeness beyond simple conversation. No secret feelings. Just two people from different worlds learning something small but important about each other, that the stories told about the other side were not always true. In the morning, the tribe gathered outside the tent, waiting to see what the queen would decide. When she stepped out, with Eli behind her, the camp fell silent. Helena raised her hand and announced that Eli would not be harmed. He had acted with honor, and he had saved one of their children. Shock spread among the people. Some stared. Some nodded slowly. The rescued child smiled brightly at Eli, as if he had always known the truth. No one knew exactly what happened inside the tent, but whispers began drifting through the camp. Whispers that maybe the queen's gaze had found something in this cowboy that no other outsider carried. Something honest. Something steady. Something worth trusting. And this was only the beginning of a story no one expected. Eli woke the next morning to the quiet sound of footsteps moving through the Apache camp. The air was cool, and a soft mist hung over the desert valley. When he stepped outside the small tent they had given him, he saw many eyes turn toward him. Some watched with curiosity, some with caution, and a few with open confusion. No outsider had ever walked out of the Apache queen's tent unharmed, much less calmly. He understood their surprise, but he didn't try to speak or make excuses. Instead, he simply nodded politely at those who looked his way and kept his hands visible, never making a sudden move. He wanted them to know he respected their home and their ways. The child he had saved the day before ran up to him with a bright expression. His small steps were careful, his leg was still bruised, but the fear he had shown earlier was gone. He smiled up at Eli and held out a small woven bracelet made of desert grass. It was simple, Maybe something children in the tribe made often. But the meaning was clear. Eli accepted the gift with quiet gratitude, touching the boy's shoulder gently. Some of the tribe members saw this and murmured among themselves. It was hard to dislike a man who treated their child with such gentle respect. Others remained unsure, watching him with narrowed eyes, but there was less hostility than the day before. As the day went on, Eli tried to help wherever he could. When an elder struggled to lift a heavy water jug, Eli carried it, without being asked. When a group of young boys attempted to fix a broken wooden fence, he showed them an easier way to secure it. He didn't speak much, but his calm presence made it easier for people to approach him. The queen watched all of this from a distance. She saw how he moved, how he never stood taller than needed, how he never reached for his gun, how he didn't act as if he were owed anything. His actions spoke more than words. She knew that even some of her own warriors could learn from such quiet strength. By evening, she invited him once again to sit by the large fire where elders and warriors gathered to talk. It wasn't an honor given easily. As Eli walked toward the fire, the tribe shifted, making space for him. He didn't sit close to the queen, but she noticed how he chose a place where he would not appear too bold or too distant. Helena began the conversation by asking about the frontier towns. She wanted to understand how outsiders lived and what dangers they faced. Eli answered honestly. He spoke about harsh winters, cattle theft, and long, lonely rides. He didn't try to hide the struggles his people faced, nor did he paint them as perfect. When he finished, she shared stories of her own people, their hardships during drought, the long journey they took to find water sources, the way they protected each other in difficult times. Eli listened closely, never interrupting. The fire crackled softly between them, almost as if it were carrying their words. Slowly, the tension in the circle faded. People began asking Eli small questions. How did he learn to track animals? How far could he ride without rest? Had he ever seen snow-covered mountains? He answered each question with patience. Even those who had doubted him earlier found themselves nodding to his stories. He spoke with humility, something many warriors respected deeply. Later that night, a guard hurried into the camp to warn the queen. A group of armed men had entered Apache land. At first, people worried they were soldiers. But when the queen sent scouts, they returned with grim news. These were not soldiers, they were bandits, who dressed like soldiers to scare villagers. They attacked small camps, stole supplies, and sometimes captured people to trade for money. Fear rippled through the Apache camp, but Helena's voice stayed steady. She ordered the children and elders to move deeper into the valley. Warriors prepared their weapons. Eli watched silently for a moment, then stepped forward. "I can help," he said simply. Some warriors looked doubtful. A few shook their heads. But the queen saw the calm in his eyes. The same calm that had guided him yesterday when he saved the child. She considered it for a moment, then nodded her permission. They moved quickly. The bandits approached from the rocky ridge, hoping to surprise the tribe. But the Apache people were ready. As the bandits came closer, the queen signaled her warriors. A sharp whistle echoed through the valley, and the battle began, not a wild battle, but a controlled defense. Eli stayed near the child he had rescued earlier, shielding him and guiding him behind cover. When a bandit tried to circle around the camp, Eli caught sight of him and pushed the man back using his strength and quick reflexes. He didn't fight wildly. He simply acted with purpose to protect, not attack. A few warriors saw this and felt their doubts fade. This cowboy wasn't acting like an outsider. He was acting like a man who cared about the people around him. Within minutes, the Apache warriors drove the bandits back. The queen herself stepped forward, her presence commanding and fearless. The remaining bandits fled, leaving behind whatever stolen goods they had carried. As the dust settled and the danger passed, people gathered to check on each other. Eli made sure the rescued child was safe, then stepped back to let the tribe handle the rest. He didn't want to draw attention or act like a hero. But the queen noticed. She walked toward him slowly. Her eyes, strong and steady, held a new kind of understanding. "You protected our child again," she said softly. "I did what anyone with a heart would do," he replied. The queen studied him for a moment longer. Then she turned to her people and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. She declared that Eli Ward, the quiet cowboy, was not an enemy. She said he had shown courage, honesty, and respect, qualities few outsiders had ever shown them. A wave of silence moved through the camp. People stared at Eli, but this time their eyes held curiosity, not suspicion. Even the warriors who doubted him at first bowed their heads slightly. That night, after the camp settled, the queen invited Eli to her tent once more. The fire inside glowed warmly, and the air smelled of desert herbs. She thanked him for his actions, not with grand words, but with simple sincerity. They talked again. Not about danger or fear, but about life. She spoke of her responsibilities, of the weight she carried as a leader. Eli listened and understood. He shared small pieces of his own life, moments of loneliness, moments of struggle, moments of quiet strength. There was no closeness beyond mutual respect, no promises, no bond that pushed past boundaries. Only a genuine understanding between two people who had lived very different lives but shared the same belief: that kindness mattered more than fear. Before dawn, Eli prepared to leave. The camp watched him with mixed expressions, some hopeful, some thoughtful, but none hostile. The child he saved hugged him tightly before letting go. Helena walked with him to the edge of her territory. They exchanged a final look, calm and steady. She told him the stories about her were often changed by fear. He replied that the stories about his people were often changed by ignorance. For a brief moment, they simply stood there, understanding each other in silence. Then Eli rode away across the desert, the early sun rising behind him. From that day on, the old legend changed. No longer did people whisper that no white man survived the Apache queen's gaze. Instead, they said one man met her eyes, shared her tent, protected her people, and left with her respect. And sometimes, respect is the beginning of the strongest stories.